Hi, I'm Gavin. Today, the claim I'll be responding to is that eliminating the death penalty in the United States will save the country and its people hundreds of millions of dollars a year. Tonight I will prove to you not necessarily that the statement is completely untrue, but that there is another reason entirely related to this why our country spends hundreds of millions of dollars a year. My opponent's secondary claims are that one, capital cases where the death penalty is a likely punishment cost a significant amount, and two, the cost of capital court cases compared to regular criminal cases and length is both greater. My response to secondary claim one is that just targeting the elimination of the death penalty in the United States will not save the country a great deal of money, as the advocate says. The cost of the death penalty is not expensive, as my opponent does state in the subpoint later on. The Texas Department of Criminal Justice puts the cost of the lethal injection at around $83 from a statistic in 2011. So my opponent's claim here should be instead that changing the process that leads up to the death penalty would save this country hundreds of millions of dollars a year rather than eliminating the penalty itself, which, as we can see, is not expensive at all. My claim in response to secondary claim two, that the cost of capital court cases compared to regular criminal ones is greater, is that capital court cases are longer for a reason and should stay that way. Here the advocate does not take into account the very important reasons why capital court cases take longer. Some taxpayers suggest that the way to address the cost question between these two types of cases is to shorten the appeals process, but that isn't likely to happen because the wheels of justice move slowly. At the best of times, when a person's life is at stake, it is even more important to go slowly and make sure you get it right. You don't want to make a mistake there when the person's life is on the line. Even if something like that could pass, although it would not, eliminating the appeals process would still be more expensive than alternative sentences. So yes, capital cases where the death penalty is a likely punishment do cost a significant amount because we're dealing with someone's life. And within that, there exists a potential consequence that if we did get rid of the death penalty, we might not be as cautious. We might not be as cautious or take as long on capital court cases. And while if that were the case, innocent people might not be executed, they could still sit in jail possibly for life. Later on, the advocate states in the subpoint that a judge and professor in California have calculated that California alone has spent over $4 billion from 1978 to 2011 on the 13 individuals who were on death row at the time. First off, I'd just like to state that the advocate's statement here was wrongly worded. Since 1978, the state of California has executed 13 individuals on death row, not had only 13 individuals on death row. Within the statement, the advocate also proves that the prisoners are the ones costing the nation a great deal, not the death penalty itself. My claims in response to this subpoint are as follows. First, $140 million a year is absolutely nothing to a state that spends as much as we do here in California. In a state budget and finance report released by our state government for the 2016 yearly budget, it stated that our government spending increased from $250 billion in the fiscal year of 2015 to $265 billion in 2016. $140 million is absolutely nothing to a state that spends as much as we do here in California. My second point is that California, along with many other states, have a great many death row prisoners that are costing us a great deal. As of July 1st, 2017, according to the Death Penalty Information Center, California sits atop all states with 746 inmates on death row. The Death Penalty Information Center also states that California's death row prisoners cost $184 million more per year than those sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The New York Times concluded in a study in 2005 that Californian taxpayers paid more than $250 million for each of the states' then 11 executions, and that it costs about $90,000 more a year to house one inmate on death row than in general population, where each prisoner has a private cell and extra guards. The Vera Institute of Justice released a study in 2012 that found the annual average taxpayer costs in 40 states that participated was $31,000 a year per inmate, but the cost of the average the taxpayer pays to incarcerate an inmate in prison in California was around $71,000 a year. In that study, it is also stated that the death row inmate cost in California is about $160,000 per year. compared to that general population being 71. If we apply that to California's death row population, then we, as a state alone, are spending $1.2 billion a year just to house and care for 746 inmates here on our death row. So in conclusion, the advocate's argument that eliminating the death penalty in the United States will save the country and its people hundreds of millions of dollars a year is not accurate due to the fact that, one, capital court cases are expensive on their own, with or without the death penalty, and they will always be greater than non-capital ones, due to the fact of the great importance of their outcomes, and that, two, that the ever-growing population of prisoners on death row that are living great deals of time off the taxpayer's dollar are the ones costing our nation so much, and not the death penalty itself. Thank you.
All right, well, the structural stuff at the beginning is fine. The argument about not being able to save money by getting rid of the death penalty, you kind of are splitting a little bit of hairs here. I appreciate the effort to point out that the method of execution is relatively cheap, but the advocate did in fact identify court costs and appellate process and all that other stuff as being part of the process. So that doesn't get you a lot. The better argument I think that you have, it concerns, why it is that we are careful about these sorts of things and why it's an appropriate action for us to allow time to go by to make sure that we get things right. I don't remember that the advocate presented an argument about the risks to innocent people being executed or getting things right, but in essence you've given us a justification for allowing those costs to be relatively high to make sure that we don't make a mistake. The risk to the innocent is, to some degree mitigated by that. And then you kind of go into the same sort of thing with the $4 billion for 13 executions. You are correct that it's 13 executions, not 13 people on death row. And the $4 billion is, of course, over the period of time for the whole death penalty, not just for each of those individual executions. If that's how you're going to measure it, it's a little bit different than if you were talking about how much you're spending per case. I think your explanation of that needs to be a little bit more elaborate. The argument about the $140 million annually, comparing it to the state budget, makes a lot of sense. That seems relatively small. The death row people, you've got this estimate about what the cost is going to be, and then you do comparisons. In essence, you're saying that California costs are excessive for some reason. We're not exactly sure what that reason is, but it certainly isn't just because of the death penalty. If the average inmate in California costs us $71,000 versus $31,000 in other places, that does seem like a substantial difference. And then you do the same sort of thing with the argument about executions. There was a little bit of math that you're doing there, and at the end it made it sound like we were spending $1.2 billion a year, and I don't think that that's what your number really represented. So that was a little bit confusing. I thought the summary of the argument was fine. You need to work on your eye contact with the audience. There's a lot of reading going on. Thank you.